Okay, so chapter 10 is the basics of saving and investing. So we're going to talk today about reasons for saving and investing. Then tomorrow we'll look at principles of saving and investing, and next week we can talk about the different strategies. And then, so this is just an intro. Then chapter 11, we will get into investing options and we'll do some additional stuff on the stock market. So this is just kind of the very beginning, the surface. So our objectives today, we're going to explain how saving and investing are related and how saving leads to investing and wealth. Describe how saving and investing can help you achieve your personal goals, and then explain how investing prepares you for retirement and beyond. So how are saving and investing related? So savings, the definition is money set aside for the future. It's also known as deferred spending, money you're going to spend later on. Saving is important because you are planning for future needs and wants. The emphasis when you save is safety of principal, which involves protecting the balance in your account. You want to make sure that money in there is safe, which we'll talk about investing, and not all options are safe. Savings also provides security. So you want an emergency fund, which is money set aside for unplanned expenses. It is recommended that you have at least 6 months of net pay in that fund. So net pay, after your taxes, how much money do you bring home how much money do you bring home every month? Multiply that by 6. That's how much money you should have in your emergency fund. And then you can think about investing beyond that. Having that emergency fund can help if any contingencies come up, which are unplanned or possible events. Something always happens. Your car may break. Maybe your dog needs to go to the vet. Something that's expensive and you don't really just have the money for, your emergency fund can help out with that. In liquidity is a measure of how quickly an asset can be turned into cash. So your savings account is very liquid. You can just walk down to Wells Fargo or whatever bank you have and get cash immediately. Some of the other things we've talked about, like CDs, they're not very liquid. You can't get the money immediately. But liquidity is a measure of how quickly an asset can be turned into cash. Good for savings are savings account, CDs, and money market accounts, which we're going to talk more about those in the next few days. And then down there in the red, it says the problem with saving is that you're not really making money because the interest rate currently is lower than the inflation rate. So if you just get a savings account, it's going to have a interest rate that is lower than inflation, which we've seen inflation is typically 2 to 3 years. 2 to 3%. So your real rate of interest on savings is actually negative. Investing, the definition is a strategy to earn more on your money than the inflation rate. The idea is that investments provide wealth. Investing is sometimes explained as using money to make money. That's the idea. You use your current money to hopefully make money. Wealth is the accumulation of assets over your lifetime. And when earning more than the rate of inflation, you are wealth building, where that red is what I just said, kind of, but in terms of investing. When you earn less than the rate of inflation, your wealth is shrinking. So investing is a long-term activity. We've already looked at the historical rates of inflation previously when we were studying inflation, so I don't think we need to go back to that, but it is there in case you want to pull it up. So saving can lead to investing because saving leads to an accumulation of liquid assets. You don't need to copy this whole read. It looks like a paragraph, but it's really not that long, but it is. But it's some of the stuff I already said. So when there's more than sufficient cash to meet your current needs and you've saved for 6 months. So if you already said you have that emergency fund of 6 months, that's when you should start investing. And to earn rates of return that are greater than the rate of inflation. That's your goal, to make money. But that's kind of the recommendation here, is that you have 6 months in that emergency fund, and then beyond that is when you can start venturing into investing. When you save and invest, you are paying yourself first. So that's the idea. You want to pay yourself first. Saving and investing money can help you to meet your personal goals and reduces your dependence on credit, so you don't have to borrow money. And then it also helps build financial security, which is the ability to meet current and future needs while living comfortably, which is the benefit of investing. So I know I've said it before, when you first start working, there's a good chance that you're probably going to have to spend most of your income to meet your current expenses, what you need, especially if you're just getting a place, and you have to furnish it and get everything that goes along with it slowly over time. And then hopefully once you do that, you will have money that you can begin saving and investing. So, if you're financially secure, that enables you to meet your personal goals. And here's examples of personal goals. So short-term goals, going camping and going to a concert. Intermediate goals, share wedding expenses, own a car. Long-term goals, own a house and add a swimming pool. So you can see, remember your book defines short-term goals as less than a year, intermediate 2 to 5, and then long-term is above that. If you look at the benchmarks here, and the financial goal of kind of where they are, all of those are money per month, save or invest, and they almost add up to $1,000. So that's kind of a lot of money to meet goals. And that's great if you have the money, but some of those long-term goals you may not be able to start. Maybe you have a long-term goal of owning a house, but you don't plan on checking in on your benchmarks for another 2 years because you know that realistically you can't invest $500 a month right now, kind of thing. It can still be a goal, but just set it in your timeline of when you want to begin checking in on those benchmarks. And I don't know about for you guys, but for me, short-term goals come up a lot because I like to try to plan to do things. And so those are always changing, which can then deter some of the long-term goals. Okay, so how does investing prepare you for retirement planning? So retirement, the definition is a period of time, usually in later years, when you are not working and need to meet expenses through other income sources. So when you retire, and I know we've briefly talked about this, your expenses typically change. Oftentimes you no longer have a mortgage. Your house is paid off because you've lived there for 30 years, not always. Work-related expenses change. You no longer commute to work. You don't have to buy lunch for work. You don't have to buy clothes for work. In retirement, it's often that medical expenses go up. Typically, older people require going to the doctor more, maybe more medicine. Insurance rates may go up. So different expenses change during retirement, and you're not working. So sources of retirement income are individual retirement accounts, also known as IRAs, 401k plans, pension plans, and Social Security. You should start to save for retirement as soon as you have your first job. We know that equation, interest equals principal times rate times time. We've seen it. You guys should all have it memorized by now. So the more time your savings can grow, the more money you will have in the end. There are 2 links here. I will go to those kind of after we finish our slides today. But again, interest is principal times rate times time. Time is on your side if you start early. So looking at this example from your book. So if you invest $10,000, the top 2, at 6%, for 20 years or for 30 years. If you do it for 20 years, you now have 32,000. If you do it for 30 years, you now have 57,000. Both of those are both just putting in $10,000 and walking away, either for 20 years or 30 years. So leaving it in there for an extra 10 years grew $25,000. The growth is not linear, so it goes up more over time. Look at that $1,000 investment. Say you got a stimulus, got a tax return, something happened and you got $1,000 and you're like, hey, I don't need this right now. I can invest it. Maybe you found something at 8%. So for 30 years, you then have $10,000, or for 40 years, it more than doubles by leaving it in there for 10 more years. If you can invest regularly, that of course is going to be more beneficial to you. You're putting money in there on a regular account basis. So $1,000 per year, looking at 5%, 20 years. So you put in $20,000 if you do it $1,000 a year. That gives you $33,000. $1,000 per year for 30 years gives you $66,000. But $1,000 for 40 years, so you end up putting in $40,000, gives you $120,000. Well, almost 121. And that's just at 5%. So finding what you can with a higher interest rate obviously works in your favor. To me, $1,000 a year, yeah, that's doable, but that's a lot of money at once. Where on the other hand, in my mind, $100 per month, that's more realistic. I can take $100 from each paycheck and put it aside. And that ends up being more than $1,000 a year. It's $1,200 per year. So if you do the $100 per month for 25 years, that ends up being $30,000, but you get $81,000. You put in $30,000. Most of you, when you start your careers, can afford $100 a month, especially if you have it set up at the very beginning to where you're not cutting that money out of you're not cutting it later on as part of your budget. If you just automatically have it set up when you first start and it goes there, then you won't be missing it. All right. So again, hopefully from this, you can see time is in your favor. So start as young as possible. And then kind of getting onto the flip side of that, estate planning, having a will and healthcare directive. So a will is a document that passes the title of property after a person dies. If you die without a will, you are in a state and your property will be distributed according to the rules of the state where you live. Your heirs are people who will inherit your money, and the executor is a person in charge of carrying out your wishes when you die. So if you have your will, your executor is the person that says, okay, well, your will says how much money and who gets what, but they're in charge of actually making that happen. A healthcare directive is also known as a living will, and it's a document that describes your wishes at the end of your life. It's important to appoint someone you trust to make healthcare decisions for you in the event that you cannot make them for yourself. So oftentimes that has to be somebody over 18. And it's not only is it someone you trust, but it's someone that hopefully you've had those hard discussions with, like, what do you want to happen? You know, and as you get older, it's easier. I shouldn't say it's easier, but it's something you think about more often. But being younger, it's probably not something that you think about. And it almost even seems kind of weird to talk and teach this to high schoolers. And I don't know a ton about it, to be honest. Like, how often do you set up a will or have to go through this? And hopefully not very often. There are different types of wills. Your book kind of explains them. We're not going to go over them. But if you don't have a will, just know it makes it a harder process for the people that are left behind. And if you have an estate or you have stuff or money, you're going to want that laid out for who gets what or what share of it. And then the last slide here, your estate is all that a person owns, so their assets minus the debts owed at a time of that person's death. So when somebody passes away, you look at their estate, so all of their assets, and subtract their debts. Estate planning is a process of preparing a plan to transfer assets to loved ones during lifetime and at death. So some people, if you start planning this, it makes for a smoother transition when somebody passes away. Sometimes if it is actual tangible things and not just money, they may get transferred to people while they are still alive. And then again, at the time of the death, whoever's in charge kind of makes sure and oversees that happening. A foundation is a fund or an organization that's established and maintained for the purpose of supporting an institution or a cause. So it's in here because some people leave part of their estates to charities. Or sometimes people donate to universities or churches, different organizations that they want to give their money to when they pass away. So that could be part of somebody's will. Okay, so then this is one of those two links. So there were two. So this says 6 things you need to know about retirement before you turn 30. We're going to go more into retirement, but why it's important to cut back now to benefit later. Anywhere you can make small changes to save more, you can. Can you buy 1 less cup of coffee a week? Maybe 1 less online purchase and put that money somewhere else. What you can expand to after your first retirement account. So this is after you've set up a 401k, then what? What kind of IRA do you want to look into? Again, we'll get into that. You want to diversify your portfolio. We're going to, again, talk about that, but just those words, diversify your portfolio, you can probably assume what that means. But the value of putting your money in now, again, time, the longer you have time, the more time you have, the better off you are. What your end goal is, that's really what you want to kind of think about though. What is your goal? How much money do you think you're going to need in retirement? And no, you don't necessarily know the answers to that now. A lot of you don't even know what you want to do, and that's okay. But once you get that job, if you can start putting money away, that's going to be better off for you. And then understand the less common routes. Just kind of look at what all of your options are. This is a wealth manager, David Bach. He says, here's how much money to save if you want to retire rich, according to him. So if you want to be dead broke, don't pay yourself first, he says. Nobody wants to be broke. So that means you really need to emphasize paying yourself first. Our book says it a lot. I've said it. It's been in the notes. Pay yourself first. He also says, spend more than you make. Get yourself into debt. That's if you want to be broke. Nobody wants to do that. If you want to be poor, think about paying yourself first, but don't actually do it. Spend everything you make and save nothing. Keep telling yourself someday. So it's just that vicious cycle. I know I need to, but I keep spending this money and you don't make any changes. If you want to be middle class when you retire, save 5 to 10% of your pre-tax income. Upper middle class, save 10 to 15%. If you want to be rich, save 15 to 20% of your pre-tax income. And if you want to be rich enough to retire early, save 20% or more of your pre-tax income in a tax advantage retirement account. Keep in mind, everyone's life is different, but this gives you a benchmark to shoot or plan around. Again, your lifestyles obviously vary. And this is a lot of money. Save 20%. So if you make $100,000 a year, you're going to put $20,000 away, and then taxes are going to be taken out. And so you might end up only having $70,000 for that year. So it's a lot of money, a big commitment, but it's something just to keep in mind, showing you where you're going to possibly end up depending on how much money you decide to put away. All right. So your homework tonight is from your book. It is the Google form, so you don't actually have to have your book unless you are handwriting your answers. And that's about it. If you have questions, I'm happy to stick around. Otherwise, I will see